Hi, everybody. I'm very excited to be here at Jamia. It's my first time, and I'm looking forward to speaking to all of you. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I was born in Bombay, and when I was age 6, my parents, along with my brother, sister, and I, moved to Calcutta. Now, I lived in Calcutta from the age of 6 to almost 20. When I was age 10 one weekend, I woke up with a blinding headache. A headache so severe that my parents had to take it seriously. I was lying on the bed, the fan was switched off, and yet it looked like the fan was spinning above my head. They put balm on my forehead, they tried to massage me, but this headache would just not go away. So on Monday morning, my father left for work, my sister left for school, my brother was already in Delhi. He was at St. Stephen's College in Delhi. And my mother decided to call the doctor. So my mother and I were the only two at home. The doctor came. I remember this doctor really well. A wonderful, twinkling-eyed Bengali gentleman, Dr. Perumal Das. Dr. Perumal Das came and he sat by my bed and he took out his reflex hammer. And that's the only thing he did. He tapped me on the leg. And then he said, he turned to my mother. My leg hadn't moved when he tapped me, you see. And he turned to my mother and he said, you need to call an ambulance. Your daughter has got meningitis. Now, a 10-year-old has no clue what meningitis is. But I could see from my mother's expression, from the fear in her eyes, that this meningitis was a scary word. Got in the ambulance, rushed to the hospital. In the hospital, I was asked to lie face down, and I had 4 nurses holding each of my limbs. And then I saw an injection, a needle, should I say, which to my 10-year-old mind's eye would have been a needle to be used for some elephant-sized human being. It looked like that big to me. And that needle was then put into my spine without any anesthetic to remove the fluid from my brain. It's called a lumbar puncture, in case you don't know. So, after that, a few weeks in the hospital, and I go home. And in the house, for the next 60 days, another doctor, a Dr. Ghoshal, comes to give me regular injections. Now, the first few days that he would come to the house to give me an injection, I would literally run around the flat, and poor Dr. Ghoshal had to chase me to catch hold of me to give me the injection. But the truth is, my mother at no point had mollycoddled me. My mother at no point had made me feel sorry for myself. So, you got meningitis. So you had a lumbar puncture. We've all just got to get on with it. My inheritance, my personal narrative, was one of resilience. It just came instinctively because that's what my mother had taught me. So by day 4, day 5, I don't remember, when Dr. Ghoshal rang the doorbell, I would open the door, I would invite him in, I would go to the fridge, take out the medicine, and give it to him. So that was my inheritance. That was part of who I was. And then we are very privileged and very lucky in that we still have an ancestral home deep in the village in Kerala. So every summer, we went home to our village. So when I had finally fully recovered, we went on our usual summer vacation to our ancestral home in the village. Now, the next door neighbor in our home was a man named Ramendran. He was probably 10 years older to me, maybe about 20, about the same age as many of you are in this audience. And he was called by the villagers Mad Ramendran, or for those of you who speak Malayalam, Prantha Ramendran. And Ramendran was called mad because he spoke gibberish. He didn't make any sense. He just spoke sounds and noises, no language that could be understood by any of us. That summer holiday, I asked my cousins, why is Ramendran only speaking gibberish? Why is he not speaking any language we understand? And they looked at me and said, oh, you didn't know? Ramendran had meningitis at the age of 3. I paused. But for the grace of God, go I. I was fully intact, both mentally and otherwise. But this young man did not have a Dr. Perumal Das with his twinkling eyes to come and speak to him. So my narrative had always been one of resilience, of not feeling sorry for myself, about trying to get on with it. But now I paused, and then I went beyond the pause, and I brought in gratitude. Gratitude was part of me now, because without that gratitude, I could not have been standing where I was. And in London in the early days, I was working in an office that will remain nameless, and there was this young woman in the office. Her name was Sylvie. And for some reason, Sylvie just took an instant dislike to me. That's my opinion, not hers. I could do nothing right. Whatever she said to me, I would then match her behavior. She would then complain to her manager. The manager would pull me up. Now this continued for weeks. It did not occur to me even once that I should go and complain to HR that this lady called Sylvie is bullying me. Because what's my inheritance? What's my DNA? I don't complain. I am self-reliant. I will be strong. So one day I was driving home from work, and I thought, I can't take this anymore. I'm just going to resign. What's the point? It's getting too stressful. But then the next morning, I paused. I stopped, and I thought, hold on a minute. Really? No. Let me reframe what's in my mind. Let me go beyond that pause. And I said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to work, and I'm going to make Sylvie my friend. Now, you might think I'm nuts by saying that to myself, when all she'd been doing was bullying me. But I went back to work, and I started being kind to Sylvie. I started being friendly with her, anything. So it was a Monday morning, I'd say, hello Sylvie, how was your weekend? And she'd probably look at me like I was nuts, because she hadn't ever heard nice things coming from my mouth. Oh, that's a lovely red blouse you're wearing, Sylvie. Where did you get it from? Anything, anything at all. But I would just keep chatting with her, friendly chat. Over a period of few weeks or months, I don't remember, she stopped complaining about me. And I won't say that we were great friends, but we were certainly getting on well together. And then one day, she said to me, you know, when you had first started working with us, I was going through a heartbreak because my boyfriend of many years had just dumped me, and I was really angry. And I thought, oh, now, there's a pause I must take. I must understand that when you see somebody else's behavior, you cannot assume what you see superficially. You don't know what's beneath it. August 11th, 2019. That date is seared on my brain for the rest of my life. My husband and I are in Albania. It's a beautiful country, and if anyone has the opportunity, I urge you to go to that country. It is a stunningly beautiful country. My husband and I are driving, late afternoon, August afternoon, 3:34 in the afternoon, and we have a head-on car collision. My husband and I are lucky to be alive today. I remember that so well. The sounds, the dust, this giant bone sticking out of my wrist, the lovely strangers, Albanians coming, pulling me out of the car, the ambulance coming, and whizzing us to the hospital. We were very lucky in that we were able to get a shared room. We went to a private hospital, and my husband and I were both in the same room. But we could only talk to each other because our mouths worked, but the rest of our bodies did not. We were both completely immobile on our beds for many weeks. And we had nurses coming around the clock to come and take care of us. Now, just to distract myself from this enormous pain I was going through, I decided to call the nurses by Snow White and her 7 friends' names, what used to be called Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. So I started calling them Smiley and Happy and Cheerful and all kinds of different names. And there was one nurse who would come in, who I called Grumpy. Now, she was extremely efficient. She was probably the most efficient of the nurses who came to take care of us. But she never smiled. She never said, how are you? Did you have a good night? Some care, some concern. I am lying there, working very hard, trying not to feel sorry for myself. But there's no rapport, there's no warmth, there's no empathy. And then I suddenly remember my story of Sylvie in London. And I say, no, I'm going to take a pause. I'm going to reframe what's in my head. I am going to go beyond that pause, and I am going to make her my friend. So I start talking to the Albanian nurse. I start sharing my stories with her. I ask her about her stories, and we talk every day. We're there for a few weeks. The day before we are discharged from hospital, the nurse comes to me and says, I'd like to share a story with you. And she says to me that she had been pregnant, and she went to full term and gave birth to a stillborn child. Now, the trauma of having that happen to her had completely blocked all her emotions. She had this cocoon around her body. She could not feel emotion. And as she was saying this to me, there were tears pouring down her face. There were tears pouring down my face, and we hugged. Now, that moment crystallized a lifetime journey for me about how to connect with other human beings. We don't know. When we see anger, it is a loss. When we see a grumpy person, perhaps it is an enormous trauma they've experienced. We do not know where they are and what their life is. Now, as part of my work, I'm sure some of you in the audience will know this wonderful Nobel Prize-winning psychologist called Daniel Kahneman. He wrote a superb book called Thinking Fast and Slow. I have read that book, and if this subject matter interests you, I would suggest you read it. Now, in Thinking Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman talks about our brains and how our brains influence us. The first point that I've made is do not feel sorry for yourself. Now, this is easier said than done, I can assure you. Because, come on, you're lying in an accident. You've had meningitis. You all have stories in this audience. Of course you'll feel sorry for yourself. But then pause. Go beyond the pause, and then take control of your own power. Because it is only you who has that power. Nobody else does. And embrace change. Now, there could be people in this audience whose narrative, whose inheritance may not be the same as mine, where I had an inclusive, non-judgmental upbringing. I mean, I remember when I was in Philadelphia, speaking at a conference, a young Italian woman came up to me, and she said, oh, you've made a lot of sense. I want to tell you something. I have grown up in an Italian joint family, what you and I call joint in India, and it's called an extended family in the West. I've grown up in a joint family where I've got parents, uncles, aunts, grandparents, and so on, where only the men have a voice, and the women have never had a voice. So when I'm at a meeting at work, I often want to open my mouth, I often want to say something, but I just don't, because that's part of my inheritance. And now, I'm going to take the pause, and I'm going to go back to work tomorrow, and I am going to open my mouth in meetings. So, what she did is she embraced the change within her, and she went beyond the pause. What's the 4th point I've got there? Accept that things are not always in your control. Now, if you have not learned that in 2020, when the pandemic hit the entire world, I hope you've learned it by now. Not everything is within our control, and it's important for you to learn and appreciate that. Do not live in the past. How many of you say, oh, 2 years ago, X, Y, Z, and then you start feeling sorry for yourself, and you go down a rabbit hole. Don't do that. Learn from your mistakes. We all make mistakes. There is no one in this room, including me, who is perfect. We will continue to make mistakes. That's okay. But then pause and reflect. Now, the last 2 points are pretty challenging. Let's imagine you have now completed your degree and you're going off to do a PhD, full scholarship at Columbia University in New York. You're really excited. You call your friend and say, guess what, I'm going. Now, the friend who you've spoken to had also applied for a scholarship but didn't get in. So I speak to all of you who are at the receiving end of that call. Are you able to celebrate the other person's success? Genuinely be happy for them? Because if you are, guess what you're doing? You're empowering yourself as much as them. And the last point I want to make, especially for the people for the students and the young people in this audience, please give yourself alone time. And when I say alone time, I'm not talking about going for a walk with your ears plugged with AirPods. That's not the alone time listening to music, no. Alone time, me, myself, and I, and your mind, and your thoughts. Reflect. Think about what is my inheritance? What is part of my DNA? Do you think I should take the pause and then go beyond that and reflect and change the way, my current way of living and thinking? So I leave you with that thought. Thank you very much.